Welcome to the Full FX Unfiltered. My name is Colin Lambert, publisher of the Full FX, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Arjun Jayaram, who is founder and CEO of Baton Systems. Arjun, welcome to the Unfiltered series. It's delightful to talk to you.
Thank you, Colin. Great to be here.
Your world has become a lot more interesting over the last couple of years, I would suspect. We've had, kicking off with the BIS in 2019, when they mentioned the big PVP gap in FX settlement. There's been an increasing number of papers from central banks, industry associations, all talking about the challenge of actually bringing more FX settlement into PVP. What I found interesting is, particularly over the last year, 18 months, is distributed ledger technology, DLT, has become much more broadly mentioned. And this kind of speaks to the Baton model, which is hence why I'm so keen to have you on the video series. So what are your general observations on the wealth of papers out there, and also on why DLT does fit so well, or seems to fit so well as a solution?
As you've seen, thank you again for the opportunity to talk about this. The BIS came out with the report in 2019 highlighting or putting the spotlight on the importance of PVP and the amount of PVP that is the amount of FX transactions that are settled without PVP, and there's a lot of risk that is out there. So if you think about the available options in the market today, there is 18 currencies that CLS settles for about 78 members, and outside of this, there is a lot of risk in that. The number of people who need access to a venue such as this is about 30,000, and the number of currencies is much more than 18. Today, Baton sees well over 50 currencies on its platform, and we are enabling safe settlements on that. So there is a huge amount of risk that is in the ecosystem, and this is a spotlight that is required. If you think about global markets moving to 24/7 and global trades, and the world is going into one big unified ecosystem or a microcosm of sorts. Trading doesn't stop at the end of the day. Trading doesn't stop at 4 o'clock. Risk doesn't stop at 4 o'clock. Liquidity crunches don't stop at 4 o'clock in any currencies. So you have to think of this as a real-time, ever-rolling system that is required in the markets. So technologies of 20 years ago is not going to solve the problems today because the business has moved on. So after the 2019 paper, I was very glad that the CPMI came out with another report last year where they did mention Baton as one of the only ones that is live in production and moving billions of dollars today. So, on any given day, we settle about $20 billion on a riskless basis, to $20+ billion on a riskless basis. But now we are moving beyond that into not just on a PVP, but other venues. We'll talk about that. It's called conditional payments, split payments, where we will talk about riskless settlements of various instruments, not just on FX, but various instruments on a riskless basis. And so that is where expanding beyond the 18 currencies into the 50 or 100+ currencies is where the markets will go to. There's no question about it. It will go there, and that's the new realm that we will be operating in.
Yeah, and I think it shows with the BIS triennial survey when the sheer amount of non-CLS stroke emerging market, developing market currencies traded, the volumes are going through the roof.
Yes, absolutely.
It's where opportunity. I guess it's where opportunities are. I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, we're talking about more trading taking place here.
Yes.
Full disclosure, I never cared about the post trade when I was trading. I think generations of traders since haven't. I sense now that they should be paying attention to this. Am I right? And why should they?
Absolutely. See, the realm of trading 20 years ago has changed. This is not the same world that you're operating in today. You take 20 years ago when you were trading, and you go back 20 years from then. You had markets that would open only 2 days a week, and that's not the case today. Today, markets are 24/7 by 365, and it is not just an FX trade. It is anything that involves a cash flow, and that cash flow can come from a derivatives trade. It can come from a trade finance. It can come from a corporate finance. There's a series of things that will result in payments, either one-way or two-way payments that are there. The FX is a derivative of that one. So essentially, of all of these payment obligations that are originating, you will have to do an FX trade to meet that one. Spot, swaps, forwards, whatever that may be. You'll have to settle that FX on a riskless basis, and then take that cash that you got as a result of that FX trade and use it for something else. So it is not, that's not the be all end all of it. You have to think of it, the entire spectrum of that one. So why is it important for an FX trader? Because the need for FX has gone up exponentially. The need for that, the world is much smaller. There is trade that is happening in a very different world. You're talking about a bipolar world or a multipolar world where trade is happening on a continuous basis. That's the realm that is there. Payments is such a critical part of it. I'm not going to be talking politics. I'm not taking my politics in this, but let's just think about it. The first thing that when you had to put an economic sanction on a country, what's the first thing that you attacked? It's the payments infrastructure.
Yeah.
That is how critical payments is to this world.
Yeah.
And I think we have to be cognizant of that fact that risk and payments and FX are integral to how the world operates today.
Yes. Yeah. And I guess, there's also, if we're at a more prosaic level where the traders will certainly sit up and pay attention, is there actually is a cost benefit in if we can actually process this stuff more efficiently?
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. So let's just bring it back to from first principles. As a trader, you did a trade. As an FX trader, you did a trade, spot forwards, whatever that may be, whatever that instrument may be, you did a trade. Now, just pause at that point. The moment you did the trade in microseconds across various venues. Okay, not just an exchange, but various venues. There's a spectrum of venues that are there. At that point in time, you have a risk that is built up on your books, right? At that point in time.
Yeah.
And you basically say that there's a risk that is built up. There is a liquidity demand at that point in time. Somewhere into the future, there's a liquidity demand because you'll have to settle the trade sometime in the future. And then you have to settle that on a riskless manner. Today, if it's outside of 18 currencies, you're out of luck. You actually have a risk on your books at that point in time. And so this is why it is important. The trade, the need for the trade just went up exponentially because of the changing macroeconomics, global politics and macroeconomics of the world. So the need for the trade went up, but you still have the same constraints of capital. Your balance sheet has got capital constraints, there is risk constraints, and there's liquidity constraints. This is why traders need to be looking at this all day long. If you can solve this particular problem, you can trade more.
Yes.
There's actually a revenue generation without increasing risk, without adding more capital or locking up more capital. And liquidity is an important thing because globally, 24/7, you're going to be trading across all currencies, which means liquidity needs to be monitored on a real-time basis.
Yeah.
And so that's the new paradigm that we're moving into.
Something else, I mean, as we're talking about sort of the impacts across different markets, something else I found interesting was the GFMA put out a paper recently on the change to T+1 and its impact on FX. And funnily enough, again, DLT gets a mention and the need for settlement systems to be more efficient and to be able to handle this sort of thing. Personally, I look at it and think there are challenges there for the FX industry with the securities move to T+1. Not least the fact that Europe actually isn't on T+1. So you've got the imbalance there. What sort of challenges does this represent for the industry in your mind? And how does your solution help meet those challenges?
So I think T+1 is, you're seeing that T+1 is an industry change. The need for ability to settle on much faster and quicker and then generate that liquidity is an important thing. So what you're seeing, T+1 is a preview of things to come. In this case, it's equities or securities that have to settle on a T+1. Other instruments are also going to move into that, and eventually you'll get into a point where it's going to be same-day settlements, optional same-day settlements, where you're not mandating it, but the ability to settle on demand any instrument on demand in a riskless manner is where it's going. You see the ripple effects of something like a T+1. It's not just happening in one side of the world. What's happening in the US on T+1 has got ripple effects across the world.
Yeah.
This is what I'm talking about, the macroeconomics and the global politics of the world. It's one connected place in that. There is somebody in Thailand that needs access to US equities that now need to settle on a T+1 basis, which means that they have to do a settlement of that currency. They have to do an FX against that currency. And guess what? CLS is not an option for that. Yeah. Add another wrinkle to that. Thai baht is a restricted currency. How do you solve this particular problem? You see, this is what the paper really highlights. And you now need systems which are 24/7 by 365 Distributed, the reason why the DLTs are useful is that these facilitate real-time data, real-time execution of workflows, and then riskless settlements of those assets. And this is what DLTs provide. And I want to distinguish the DLT from a blockchain.
Yeah.
There are venues when you don't need tokens at all. Baton really, we are not against tokens, but we find that in most cases, using fiat money in order to settle, and only when you really, really can't use fiat money because of hard cutoff or RTGS, then and only then do you use the equivalent of tokens backed by real assets in the bank. So essentially, that's the realm in which DLTs are going. But it's the right time. I mean, this is preview of coming attractions. This is how the markets are going to be 5 years from now. Many more instruments are going to be settled same day, and use that liquidity to settle something else.
And I guess then the interesting thing for me there is obviously there are firms that want to settle same day. There are many firms that want to settle probably at the end of day.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're a prop trading firm, you can say, okay, how much do I owe you? Or more likely how much you owe me. But if we build this this framework is built, it can work across multiple horizons. It doesn't have to be. What you're saying is it doesn't have to go to T+0. If certain customers still want to trade T+2 or T+1, they still are able to do that.
Spot on. And so this is why batch-based systems and centralized systems won't work. Yeah. So let's double click on this. In a batch-based system, look at a CLS, look at an instrument like a CCP. Everybody has to march to the same beat. These are batch-based systems. You can't change that realm. It's a batch-based systems, basically saying that I will run one big netting set, I will tell you your obligations, and you settle that. What the paradigm that we are talking about is bilateral or multilateral. So you basically decide between parties which instruments you're going to settle end of the day, which instruments you're going to settle bilaterally. You can do that on a multilateral, you can do that on a multilateral netting. You can do a bilateral currency netting or a currency pair netting. You can decide which instruments you're going to settle, and you can settle that on riskless basis, use that liquidity and settle another instrument. So I can settle a T+1 equity settlements, get that one. I sold equities on that, take that currency and then do my FX settlements on another one, and use that to do a trade finance that a large trade finance for my customer. This is the way in which the market, there's only so much liquidity in there. How do you use that liquidity all through the day without adding risk to the balance sheet?
Yeah. And I'd like to actually follow up as well on something you mentioned earlier. You're talking about sort of payments, because ultimately, I guess it's probably important to observe that, yes, the regulators and the central banks of the world want as much as possible in PVP, but to your point on restricted currencies, for instance, you can't PVP a lot of the time with these things. And there are always going to be areas we cannot PVP, for example. Right. So I guess, first of all, what do we do about that? And then secondly, it's about, this is about much more than just FX settlement. It's about the payments world more broadly.
Yep. It's correct. I mean, everything in the world, any exchange of value, whether it's a small shopkeeper selling this, it's an exchange of value that will involve a payment, and you bubble it up, and that anything that is in the bank results in a payment, which is either a cash coming in or a cash going out, or securities coming in and cash going out. Instruments, that is there, and FX is I would say that it is possibly a derivative of this. Why do you do an FX? Is because all of these trades that I've done, I need an FX trade in order to do that, facilitate the settlements, unless you're purely hedging on that. So essentially what you're seeing is that, Baton, as we have become more and more mainstream, we have added more workflows to the ecosystem. So now we have a product called Core Payments, which is basically saying that we are able to handle all the cash flows of a bank, not just an FX trade. It also includes FX trades. It's an important part of it. It's actually a major part of it. But essentially, any kind of a cash obligation, from the moment the cash obligation originates, we are able to settle that. And this cash obligation, only when we got into the realm of that's when I realized that this is a lot more complex, and it's shining the spotlight on areas that we had not thought about. Restricted currency. How do you do a restricted currency of sorts? An example of that is somebody in Thailand, like I told you, somebody in Thailand wanting to buy an US equities, and then what about that person buying US equities and then selling that US equities and then getting the Thai baht back? You see, there's an equity transaction, but immediately on the back of that, you need an FX trade because and so this is where the complexities of this come in. And so we are realizing that in some cases, especially when it comes to restricted currencies, you cannot do a PVP. And so we are now in the way I wanted to understand, I'm not going to propose a solution and then say that the whole world comes to that. And I asked, how do you solve this particular problem today? And they said, you understand that the problem that we are trying to solve is that I cannot have a restricted currency like a Thai baht. I need to demonstrate that the need for the Thai baht that I'm buying is for an equity trade that I did.
Yeah.
Right. So essentially what we do is, because of we are getting all the cash flows, along with the cash flows, we say that this particular, there is a record on the ledger that says this particular Thai baht buy that I'm doing and the sell of US dollars is for the underlying trade of this, the buy of the US dollars and the sell of the Thai baht that I'm doing is for the equity trade that I just did, which is a buy of the US equities. That's recorded on the ledger. And so we do the conditional payment. So we do one leg of it, that's payment on payment. Once we see one leg of the payment come in, we release the second leg of the payment.
Yeah.
But it's simultaneous. It's simultaneous. Like immediately the payment comes in and the second leg happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I it's quite fascinating to me how many different ways we can make a payment. As somebody who grew up in a different era, obviously, but you think, well, yeah, it is quite impressive. And so I guess then finally, to bring it full circle and back to DLT, and I think you made reference to an important point there about the difference between DLT and blockchain, because if you come back to the FX workflow, just about every business has a different way of doing things. They have the same end result and they all fit into a system in a certain way, but they all have different bits of workflow. And am I right in saying that DLT gives you the flexibility that maybe blockchain doesn't?
DLT does. I mean, the important thing is that the way we design the DLT is interoperability. So how do you go into a bank and you say, look, what kind of technologies do you have? And you have post-trade systems, a Calypso, a Murex, an Ion, a GMI. You can dismiss this very easily, and then you have to say that these are all legacy systems of 20, 30 years ago. But before you dismiss that, you have to understand the dependencies of a bank on these systems, on these post-trade systems. These are very, very old systems, highly customized on that. It's very hard to disintermediate that. So you have to start with interoperating with these systems and start slowly taking these workflows onto the new world of a distributed ledger technology, cloud-based technologies, microservices-based technologies that can really reduce risk and bring it into the new world. So essentially, that is how you take it. One workflow at a time, you're taking it out of these old systems and bringing it into this one. So essentially, you have GMI systems that can, today, one GMI system cannot talk to the other GMI systems. That's not possible, right? And so what about a GMI on one side and an Ion on the other side? How is that ever going to interoperate? This is where Baton has built in the distributed ledger technology and interoperability, whereby we get this cash flows right from the very beginning. The workflows are executing. So on one side, it could be getting it from an Ion system. The other side could be getting it from a GMI system. But you're seeing the same set of data, and you're executing that workflow across organizations on that. And the cash flow that you just did could be for an equity swap. It could be for a corporate payment. It could be for a trade finance. It could be for an FX. You're essentially doing all of these things. You're netting them, which is a workflow. You're deciding when to net, how to net, and then you're doing the settlements of that. That settlements part could be on a PVP. It could be on a payment on payment, or it could be even something even better, which we've seen. Saying that, look, I know that I owe you so much of Turkish lira. It's very difficult to, especially at this time, you see the Turkish lira going. Look at the liquidity demands. This is a real world problem. The liquidity demands on Turkish lira at this point in time. Now you can actually split that payments into multiple chunks, and you can make that payments all through the day, or you can do it in the next, instead of making one large payments, I can split this up into 5 different payments and then reduce the risk, progressively reduce the risk. This is how we are seeing the ecosystem of payments, which is not just FX, but payments ecosystem going and workflows coming onto a DLT.
Arjun, it's a fascinating space, I have to say. This blend of technology and the updating of the foreign exchange industry's processes, one of the core processes of our industry. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on this. And for
Thank
joining
you so much for having me here. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Great. And to our audience, thanks very much for watching, and we'll be back again very soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.